As of the time of this review, over 300 people have died on Mount Everest. The mountain, which reaches approximately 29,000 feet at its summit, remains littered with the bodies of those who failed to conquer it. The most well-publicized event in Everest's history took place in May of 1996, when a vicious storm pelted the mountain, resulting in the deaths of 8 people. That event led to the publication of Jon Krakauer's best-selling book, Into Thin Air. It also led to an onslaught of criticism regarding the over-commercialization of Everest herself. The 1996 Everest disaster has been covered in various forms before, with the latest being 2015's big-budget ensemble cast-driven Hollywood film, the aptly titled Everest. So where does it rank in the pantheon of modern disaster films? Let's find out. Thanks so much for checking out the review. Before we get started, click on that red subscribe button and the notification bell. That way you know whenever I post a new piece of content. I have this weird fixation with disaster movies. I reviewed Titanic a few weeks ago, and there's something about watching people make awful, head-scratching, world-changing decisions that makes for great cinema. Everest certainly isn't nearly to that scale, but it's a largely successful and very human story about two things. It's about answering the question, what causes people to risk their very lives to claim the ultimate prize? It's also a brutally honest retelling of the 1996 disaster. That's basically it. With very few extraneous plot lines to speak of, Everest centers its narrative around Jason Clarke's Rob Hall, the New Zealand-born mountain guide who's got a baby on the way and just wants to get people up and down Everest in one piece. Other primary cast members include Keira Knightley as Hall's wife Jan, Jake Gyllenhaal as rival guide Scott Fisher, Josh Brolin as wealthy Texas climber Beck Weathers, Robin Wright as Beck's wife Peach, Sam Worthington as mountain guide Guy Cotter, and Michael Kelly as Jon Krakauer. The film's cast is solid enough, but the movie succeeds largely because of its story and utilization of those characters. Instead of painting in broad strokes, it works small character details into the story. By laser focusing on the characters attempting to conquer the mountain, it makes the tragic ends they meet that much more devastating. Rob Hall wants to get his clients to the top while also making sure they get home safe. Jan Hall wants her husband to make it home for the birth of their daughter. Scott Fisher wants to live the bachelor lifestyle while also doing what he loves. Beck Weathers wants to escape from the doldrums of family life and do what makes him feel alive. At one point in the film, the climbers are sitting around at camp. Krakauer, who everyone knows is on this trip for the sole purpose of writing an article for Outside Magazine, breaks the ice with a question. Why? He asks everyone why they're here. What has caused them to spend an insane amount of money to conquer the greatest mountain on planet Earth? It's an intriguing question, but one that largely gets discarded in the back half of the movie. Discarded because thoughts of why are completely irrelevant when Mother Nature decides your time is up. Everest deserves credit for asking the question, and there's a moment at the end of the movie where that question is answered for one of the characters. It's a surprisingly touching moment in a film that's filled with them. As technically sound as Everest is, one of its greatest accomplishments is capturing the sheer magnitude of Mother Nature's wrath. While the weather forecast is fine leading up to the final ascent of the mountain, things take a turn for the worst when a series of massive storms pummel Mount Everest on consecutive days. Couple this with a few small but catastrophic leadership failures, and death becomes the inevitable result. The movie certainly makes its point, often extravagantly, about the consequences of making a single mistake and being punished without remorse for it. I feel like now is as good a time as any to interrupt the review and point out that director Baltasar Kormákur is from Iceland. This movie's about Mount Everest and snow, and he's from Iceland. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, death and punishment. One of the things I appreciate the most about Everest is that it doesn't pull any punches. When the storm rolls in, she rolls in hard. She doesn't care if you've got a baby on the way or if you're Charles Manson piggybacking down the hill on Jeffrey Dahmer's back. She's relentless and she's absolutely coming for you. All these big budget disaster flicks seem to have one thing in common: the inability of humanity to understand its place in the pecking order. You can do everything right. You can secure the rope lines, you can stock up on oxygen, heck, you might even make the 2 p.m. turnaround time required to get back down the mountain safely. But even if you do all of that stuff right, all it takes is one mistake. All it takes is one bad decision in the heat of the moment for 8 people to lose their lives. Everest adequately captures the scope and scale of Mount Everest and the most publicized disaster in climbing history. As good as the film looks, sounds, and feels, it's nothing without the emotional resonance tied to the tragic loss of life. These factors all combine to form one of the best disaster movies of the last decade and a compelling film in its own right. Thanks so much for checking out the video. If you enjoyed my review or found it helpful, please consider subscribing. You can also like and share the video since that tells YouTube it's worth promoting. Let me know what you think of Everest down in the comments, and I'll see you next Wednesday at 9 a.m.